Aisha, uh, thank you for being with me. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy and got a lot going on. So, Aisha, for people who don't know you, who are you?
Hello, my name is Aisha Mobley, and I'm the Community Mobilization Coordinator for Christian Churches United. I coordinate and recruit volunteers for our events and activities that support people experiencing and coming out of homelessness, poverty, and returning citizens. I'm also over the Compassion Action Network, which is a grassroots group of people that we kind of wear the umbrella organization over, and I support that. When I started, we had about 73 members. We now have about 150, and all of those members are from different organizations, individuals, churches. We are LGBTQ, we're compassion friendly. All of them have a heart for the street homeless, specifically the street homeless, and they are a big group that provide donations for any of the things we need, like our shelters, for people, for all of our homeless folks. They come with donations daily. So I'm constantly sorting, collecting, and handing out donations.
Wow. Well, thank you for the work that you do, Isha. Did you say Ish?
It's Isha, long
Isha.
E.
Okay, Isha. Gotcha. Isha. Um, well, thank you for the work that you do, Isha. And also, I'm sure the people that you work alongside and work for, are really appreciative of the work you do. So thank you, seriously, for doing that work. It's important work. Um, have you been doing this work for a while? Like, I'm talking pre-pandemic.
I actually was hired at Christian Churches United on March 11th. That was my first day. And then the shutter in was March 13th. And then in April, as part of my job, we started our coordinated outreach with CASH, Coalition Against Homelessness. So every Thursday, starting in April, we had an outreach under at the 10th City at 10th and Mulberry under the Mulberry Street Bridge. We set up our tables. So that included so CCU, Help Office, case managers, Valley Youth House for the youth that are homeless, ages like 16 to 21. We had Salvation Army was giving us the boxes of food. Bethesda Mobile Mission Van was delivering the 50 boxes to the site. We had UPMC nurses and outreach there, checking on the homeless and taking temps and coordinating them with medical services. Drug and alcohol is there. Crisis is there. Dauphin County Library is there, and they provided a charging station for their phones and Wi-Fi connection so they could use their phones, and a computer covered in plastic, that was disinfected regularly. Also, as one of the initiatives that I brought forward through CAN was we provided helped them get their stimulus package and filed their taxes. We got them registered to vote, and we also brought the census there.
Wow. So
So that's
y'all.
how long I've been doing this for CCU. But prior to CCU, I've worked in the helping field. I have a master's of education degree in counselor education with a rehabilitation emphasis. So I've been counseling, doing drug and alcohol, behavioral health, mental health. I'm 48, so I've been doing that for well over 25 years.
Yeah. So first of all, that's insane. That sounds like you're doing a lot of things to help keep people, um, at least somewhat afloat during this pandemic. And one question that I have for you is: have you seen these problems like street homelessness that you named before uh, get substantially worse over the course of this pandemic?
Yes, because of the evictions, we've had frequent new people coming actually to the outreaches, new people moving into the various 10 cities. So we just recently expanded our 10 city outreach. We were already going to PennDOT after the Mulberry Street activity, but it wasn't a full coordinated effort. And so now we go to both sites. We do an hour at 10th and Mulberry, and then we pack up and then reset up at PennDOT 10 city area, the encampment there. Also, I wanted to comment as part of the coordinated outreach, I forgot to mention the city provided about 6 chained trash cans at both sites. And we also put a water spigot at both sites. So they had running water, and we put 2 porta potties at both sites. So we do all that for our street homeless to support them. So anybody coming, new out there, we're reaching out to them, trying to keep track of who's who, putting them on like the coordinated entry list, getting them in our HMIS system so they can get housing. But yes, the rise it's been on the rise. As you already know, Caleb, so he's already told you the various numbers of people evicted, but it's also impacting our number of street homeless because we're seeing new folks coming in actually from other cities, other counties. So not just ours. Are we seeing people that we're receiving that have been evicted?
So people who are being evicted during this pandemic, why are they not being protected from eviction, especially when there's a CDC declaration that protects them? What's going on?
Well, there's a couple reasons. Unfortunately, landlords have been pretty skilled at finding the loopholes in that moratorium. Some of the loopholes include notices to quit. So they'll give a notice to quit the whole lease. So if they quit the lease and they don't want to renew the lease, they can keep that way. They can evict you basically because of that, because that has nothing to do with non-payment of rent. The CDC moratorium only covered for non-payment of rent. If they accuse the tenant of, well, you have police calls, well, you didn't take the trash out, you didn't pay the water bill on time, any of those types of code violations, or they make it a code issue, that doesn't fall under the CDC moratorium. So those people are being evicted as well. People who were on a month-to-month lease, and they had a good relationship with their landlord in the past, they're not renewing leases. The other piece to it is landlords who have themselves are tired of not being paid. They're selling their properties. So tenants are finding out the lease they had doesn't transfer to the new owner. And so new owners are like, okay, you need to go. We have the property now. We're terminating this lease. You don't have a lease, basically. And then we've also found landlords, because people don't always keep copies of their documentation, landlords are refusing to give copies of leases. So when people go to court, they have no proof of anything. So those are some of the reasons. Yeah.
Wow. That last part about pretty much a verbal lease is insane. That's yeah, wow. And so a question that I have is, why don't these judges review these cases like these and throw them out? Like, just because the judge has the discretion to make sure that these people don't end up homeless, why aren't these judges doing that in these cases?
You would be surprised. I have to say, what happens in the landlord-tenant law with judges is very, unfortunately, similar to some of the corruption we've seen in DC and out of that administration. We have a lot of that also going on with landowners and judges. Some of the judges from their very bench have been advising landlords on how to get around the CDC moratorium. We've heard stories of sheriffs as they're serving people laughing at them like, you'll be outside tonight, as they're ushering people off their property, and passing them past their belongings that they can't, scrambling to try to grab what they can. So there's mean-spiritedness, everywhere. And so it's right here in our landlord-tenant issues as well, and the judges, unfortunately. I won't name any specific judges, but these are the reports that we've gotten from tenants.
That's unbelievable. Are you aware of any instances where a judge and a landlord is having what you would consider to be an inappropriate relationship outside of the court?
I've heard of some, but I haven't been super instrumental in that part of thing because in that part of efforts, because I've been too busy giving direct services to actually the street homeless. I went from part-time to full-time. Now I'm an official outreach worker in addition to my community mobilization because of all the contacts I've made and follow through I have. So and I love speaking with the people. So my position has expanded to the outreach. So I'm not really part of that part of the eviction pieces. But I will say that I wanted to mention Mid-Penn Legal. now does have the landlord mediation toolkit, and I know that Caleb has been pushing that out there. Caleb Kosick from Greater Harrisburg Tenants United and No Eviction Coalition. So they've been pushing that as a tool to help people stay and maintain in their housing rather than be evicted. So that's another process if the landlord is willing to go through that process.
Awesome. But I mean, it still bothers me, because it seems like what you're describing is the landlords are going around the CDC declaration, and they're saying it's for other reasons, but it is for lack of payment. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correct?
Many times, the lack of payment is really the driving force behind the attention that the landlord is giving that tenant. And so then so they'll compound it. So okay, so they're not paying me, so I'm just waiting for them to do anything wrong. Oh, your music was too loud, that's it, it's a breach of contract, you're evicted. Things like that. Those are like soft skills. So you can prove it, but you can't prove it. If the landlord says they were noisy, then that's at the landlord's discretion. If a neighbor calls, that they could be working in cahoots with other neighbors to call, so then they have a justified reason. They could make the anonymous call themselves as the landlord, and then the police show up. Then they say, "Oh, you have a police contact on our property, eviction." So there's many loopholes for any unscrupulous landlord or landlord who's just simply fed up. Because I just want to also be fair to landlords, because we've had landlords who are being patient, who are waiting, who are working with their tenants, and then they are slapped in the face when they see DoorDash deliveries and empty boxes for 80-inch flat screens, on the property, but yet you're not paying your rent. So that does exist as well. So I don't want to just harp on landlords, but there are some tenants who are being dishonest and misusing the moratorium as well.
Would you say that's minority or majority?
I want to say close to half and half. Close to half and half, maybe 60-40. 60 where it's truly a money issue and they're struggling, but there could be a good 40-30% where they're skating. They've had money, they've had opportunities to pay the rent, but they've chosen to pay for other things. That is happening. There was a gentleman called in for help who had he had furniture bill that he was paying for new furniture. He had Sirius, Pandora. He's paying all that, but he never paid his rent since August.
Yeah,
What do you do with that? So
yeah, that seems like it would be a mismanagement of priorities. But being that that's a minority of the folks, do you think that maybe landlords are maybe being tainted by that small portion of people that are taking advantage of them, and then they're having a lack of empathy for those who actually are significantly in a significantly bad financial situation?
I definitely agree with that. Definitely agree with that. Because it does kind of the word, makes you a little jaded, a little cynical to people's stories when you've been witnessing people getting DoorDash deliveries, and TVs and new furniture, but they're not paying the rent. So that would sour me as a landlord if I'm struggling, because the landlords too didn't get into the business to not make money. You buy property and rent it out because you're trying to make money. So but the whole thing is, this is hurtful across the board. This situation is hurting everyone. So then when people are all hurting, unfortunately, we do begin to turn on each other, and sometimes lose sight of our greater good within. But here we are at Christian Churches United, still pushing for the greater good within, still trying to help people, get their paperwork and documentation together so they can get this rental assistance. Another that just takes me to another issue. A lot of times people don't have their documentation. To get any federal funding or anybody to fight, even for the CDC moratorium, you have to keep up with your documentation. You have to have your paperwork, screenshot, print, take a picture of it. We all have our smartphones, so you got to take a picture of these important documents and keep that with you. Even text it to friends, so in case you lose your phone, you can recall those pieces back. Email it to mom, grandma, a safe place, so you can recall even your pay stubs. People really had no way to get their pay stubs. Anytime you want rental assistance or you're proving that you're in a struggle, you got to have some documentation. So I just wanted to put that out there while we have this moment to remind, the folks out there, keep your paperwork. It's very, very important. Bank statements, pay stubs, record of your bills, bill payments, those are important.
Yeah, I think that's very useful advice. It seems like, and I was talking to Caleb about this, it seems like these are everyday working class people, and they're going up against mostly property management corporations. Is that what you're experiencing too? Is it more corporations than individual landlords?
Yes, my understanding when we meet for No Eviction Coalition and we hear Caleb's reports, it's usually more the bigger corporate um, landowners, property owners. They have these very strict rules. So the moment, they have a system. So the moment your rent is late, on the fifth day, they immediately start accruing late fees. So if I can't pay my rent and you're tacking on a $50 or even if it's as low as $5 a day late fee, that adds up. And so, yeah, so the regular everyday Joe is trying to figure out these processes and paperwork, and it is very daunting. If you can't locate your paperwork, and then the banks aren't like just open for you to walk in anymore. You got to make an appointment to really get some of your paperwork. So it can be daunting, but that's why Fair Housing Council is there. That's why Center for Justice and Peace, K. Pickering, is there. No Eviction Coalition is there. So this is helpful to continue to get the word out to let people know there are resources. It is hard, it is daunting, but it is doable. It's possible because as a note of positivity, Christian Churches United, when we facilitated the CARES rent relief funding, we were able to help over 160 families, over 865 families with rent relief.
That's amazing, and I'm grateful for organizations like your own and people like you, Isha. But one thing that seems to be a clear theme here is that in the United States of America, we have consistently bailed out corporations when they run into a little bit of trouble financially. And we struggled to
Mm-hmm.
get any stimulus for our working class families throughout this pandemic. We had the one round of checks, and then we finally uh, got around to that second round. It was 50% of what the original payment was, $600 for working class
Mm-hmm.
families. That's all we could come up with, $600. And so, do you think that $600 is really going to help the people that you work with?
The $600, when I looked at the street homeless, some of them who got it were able to put down payments on rooming houses and move out of the street homelessness. Some of them, just like everybody else, they were just so excited to have their money. They maybe got a hotel room so they could get off the street for a few days, enjoy a warm place, watch some TV, and so some of that money went to that, but no, that money wasn't enough to really make huge dents. If you're a parent and finally you get a couple dollars in, that 600 went pretty quickly. If you want to keep Wi-Fi on in your house, because everything we're doing, at least you need Wi-Fi. So you got to pay that bill for your kids so they can have computer. Then the car, gas to go to the store. It's just 600. Like I'm sure within a day, people spent that. You couldn't make 600 stretch. And it is sad because when I read a report that Congress gets paid $3,300 a week while deciding, while debating, while arguing whether or not to give to working people who are struggling, and the unworking, the people who are not able to work. And you only could come up with $600 while you are making 3,300 every week. And you never once went without your pay while people struggle and continue to struggle, and people are continuing to die, from the pandemic. So yeah, it was a sad, sad state of affairs to watch that happen. But no, that money is not enough to really make a huge difference.
Yeah, I figured as such from some of the conversations that I've had and interactions that I've had. Um, I do want to make a distinction because I think you pointed out something that's very important, and I want to point this out so that it's clear. When I say working class, and this is every time I've said it before, and every time I'm saying going forward, just to be clear, working class is exactly what I call it. It's a class. It doesn't mean you're working or unworking. It's referring to where you rank in on America's hierarchy. There's the corporate interests and the corporations themselves at the very top, and then pretty much everyone else. And we're the working class, the people that keep this country going, the people that make the corporations money. So when I say working class, just to be clear, I don't mean working or unworking. I just mean it as a class designation. We are the people in the working class that make the corporations money and keep this country moving forward. Um, and continuing on that, it makes it uh, extremely troubling to hear that the people that keep this country going forward, the people that make these corporations so much money in the first place, so that they can invest their money in other things like owning real estate and managing real estate. That is a slap to the face to only be able to come up with $600 in 2020 total for an unprecedented pandemic. We could only come up with $1,800 for working families. And some places in this country, that's not even enough for 1 month of rent. So that's unbelievable. And you know, I think that one common thing that I'm also seeing is that it's a perpetual state because you talked about those fees, those late fees that add up and add up and add up, you know. But there's also the actual fact of like the eviction being on the record, right?
Absolutely.
And a question that I want to ask you that I've seen a lot of people ask is, you know, when people are evicted, does that actually make it harder for them to get out of homelessness? Like when people end up on the streets and homeless, does homelessness itself lend itself to more homelessness or perpetual homelessness?
I would have to say yes, because if you were evicted, no matter what the reason, no matter what you say the reason was, if another landlord, as you venturing off to try to rent a new apartment, and you have that past eviction on your record, it definitely will bar you from many future evictions. So then that does force folks to unfortunately get with landlords who are not as what do I want to say, honest and professional. There's a word that people say is a derogatory word. They say slumlord, but unfortunately, those are the types of landlords that when you have a past eviction or evictions on your record, you're kind of stuck with dealing with. I won't say the word again, but a more jaded type of landlord who is a little more scrupulous, um, maybe less likely to keep the places clean, everything up to code. So they're stuck with that, and some of the more worse neighborhoods, where high crime areas, more trash is around their neighborhood. So unfortunately, yes, it is a cycle that repeats itself and lends to more homelessness. So then that put us at Christian Churches United. We just hired a woman who worked for us for the rent relief. I've recruited her. She was a volunteer helping get our street homeless to vote. And so I connected her. She will help us with the rent relief. And so she is now our landlord locator. And so one of her primary jobs is to find landlords who are willing to rent to our folks, because we will help with rental assistance. We have rapid rehousing to help people pay their rent for several months. But even with that voucher in hand, there's landlords who won't rent to them because of the past evictions. So yes, to answer your question, that's how that cycle repeats. So then now we're actually, reaching out and trying to make connections with landlords who and explain our program to them, how we're able to pay and compensate for at least a period of time to get that person on their feet, hoping and negotiating landlords will work with us. So we can get our people out and keep them housed.
And my question following that is, who is to blame, for that, and who can fix it? Who do we blame for people being put in these positions where they're left on the streets and perpetual homelessness, as you just described it, and who can fix it?
Well, it's a group effort. It was a group effort to get us there to that state. where we're in now, and it's going to take a group effort to get us out. So, just like we were able to do a coordinated outreach in our county with cash, CACH, other counties are seeing what we're doing and trying to figure out how they can do similar. But it takes a lot of people, willing to play nice with each other, stay in communication, and continue the efforts. And everybody doesn't want to do that. Everybody doesn't want to come, stand outside and work, and do outreach. Everybody's not willing to do that. And that is really, unfortunately, the grassroots is what it takes to make these types of changes. But how did we get here? Some of it, again, I would say 60-40. Sometimes people themselves, there's many programs out here, and there are people who just want to take advantage of programs. They go from program to program, using the money up, and never really moving forward with their actual lives to utilize it to get a new skill, to get their GED, to get the better job, because there's Dauphin County is an oasis of helps. Now, I can't speak to the other counties, but Dauphin County, we have a lot of help, a lot of food, a lot of coats, a lot of everything. So people here in our county really shouldn't starve and go without. There's many resources. So it's about connecting to the resources, getting the resources to the people so they know what's out there. Because you'll have a pocket of people who know, and then you'll have a whole other pocket who are like, what? That's out there? That's the service? There's a place that will help me pay my back rent? There's a place that will help me when I can't, pay for my medication. It's way too expensive. That there's a place like that there. So yes, it's about, more getting the word out, letting people know that their services are there. And then people misusing it, that causes people in the system to be jaded and not want to help people as thoroughly. And then the other half of it, the other, really 60% is it's a system. There's a system because of racism. Okay. Because of racism and discrimination, there's a system that keeps a certain group of people, the working class, and then the minorities, lower. So that system is what we have to actually address. And that really takes the full group, and it takes a lot of transparency, people being honest. And so, of course, I'm optimistic and hopeful with the new administration from the White House that will have a trickle down effect across this country of, people working together and really wanting to make a true change in our systems.
Let's hope so. We're really counting on it at this point in this country. Um, Aisha, I appreciate you being here and talking to me about this. Before we go off, I have one final question, and then I'll hand it over to you to answer that question and close with anything else that you want to close off with. But the people you talked about a system that affects certain people. I'm curious if you could just name who those people are and what you've seen that illustrates that, and just any other thoughts that you would want to close on.
When I think of systems, okay, so COVID, our COVID pandemic crisis has really shed light on how systems have been working against a group of people. So people of color, we have been at the highest risk to contract COVID and then die from it, right? So why is that? Not because, at least we haven't found proof that it was literally geared and targeted, and created to actually specifically come for people of color. That wasn't the case so far, what we've seen in the medical science literature. It's just that we were more susceptible because we've already experienced over the years a system of racism and discrimination in our healthcare. So we have a system of women, Black women die in childbirth more than any other culture. We have more problems with our female body that don't get addressed properly than any other culture. So that's a system. So then you introduce, boom, a pandemic in the middle of a system that was already broken, then you have even more chaos. So those systems, I'm thinking of medical and the educational, and public works, and then when they do districting, the lines and how they do, how they do the lines. And then even this year's census, we're going to feel a negative impact. I believe, unfortunately, from this year's census, the way this outgoing administration was able to rush the process of the census during the pandemic. They should have been allotted as much time and resources as possible to get the census, because the census impacts the resources that come to us, the grassroots, the people on the ground, the working class. That's how important the census, being properly calculated was, and it wasn't. They didn't get their full opportunity. So those are the systems, that I'm thinking of in place without naming a specific company is education. So you can look at a few people, but it's a system. The individualized education plan. There's a system in place to keep people of color down, and we have more IPs. We have more kids in detention centers. So those are the systems I'm just kind of stressing. And then the one last thing I just wanted to say before we close out is www.ccuhbg.org. That's our website. If you add the /volunteer to that website, then what'll pop up is all of the different list of organizations that I actually help oversee and participate with for the street homeless. There's a donate button. And so, I would love for people to participate with either donating or volunteering. We have 2 shelters that are open, and then we have a residential shelter that we have. So we have 3 actually, but the winter overnight shelters only run until March 30th, the end of March, to get people out of the bitter cold of the winter. And so just want to get that out again, www.ccuhbg.org/volunteer. And again, my name is Aisha Mobley with Christian Churches United of Tri-County, and other people may know it as the Help Office. And I was glad that you had me. Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Holmes.
Thank you so much, Aisha.